welcome everybody from my side as well. Today's topic is on sales, an important topic for every startup, and we will be talking about the sales process in general and how to start from that from day one. We will talk about incentive schemes for salespeople, and we will be talking about best practices in building those teams and making sure that you train them and motivate them in the right way. And there's not many people in Berlin who could potentially have a bigger say on this topic. So our guest for tonight is Michael Brehm, one of the probably most reputable serial entrepreneurs that we have here. I think he has founded and invested in more company than McKinsey has advised. So it's truly a pleasure to have a chance to talk to Michi and to give you a little bit of more insights.
Thank you. Vielen Dank.
Michi, you have managed gigantic sales teams, 2,500 people at Rebate Networks. What defines a sales-driven organization from your point of view?
What you see is that basically sales is the one that's driving the course of the company and driving the product and actually the product development roadmap and the technology development roadmap a lot. While if you go, for example, more to tech-driven companies, the engineers have a much bigger say, and then if you go to product-driven companies, obviously the designers would have a much bigger say. One company where you could see this greatly is Snapchat, for good or worse, but where it didn't matter what the engineers or the business people said, where all the metrics said, hey, your new release is not going to resonate with the customers, but the designers said, we like it, and we're a design-driven company, so we're going to release it, and we don't care if we lose, 50 or 100 million users, we're going to release it because the customer should use it. And that's the same with sales. And I think, for me, one of the most sales-driven companies is probably Microsoft. They would probably argue differently, and they have a lot of different business units, but in general, it's enormous, the sales engines they have built, or out of Germany, SAP, it's amazing what they have done there. And then ultimately how much this is influencing.
Giving you a topic that is happening at e.ventures at the moment, we are trying to recruit a great chief commercial officer, chief revenue officer, chief sales officer, however you want to call this. Generally speaking, without the CSO, CRO, CCO kind of title, what makes a great sales representative?
There are two things that are really important for me. One is being a good listener and being able to ask good questions. I think that's a key. You always, if you think about a salesperson, like the public image is always this great guy who does magic, who's very extroverted, and who talks somebody into using the product. And reality is that sales is actually totally different. It's more asking the right question, trying to understand the problem that the customer has. And then from there forward, working to that. So if I speak with a very extroverted person, I'm always slightly suspicious and think like, is he really the right one, especially in a B2B context, to do this? And so that's one.
Do you see cultural differences here? Because I think that the German salesman and the US salesmen are very different.
It's
from
like day and night. The Americans are great presenters. They are amazing how they present themselves. And you always, I think in the US, everybody discounts for a bit, and it's really a challenge for us Europeans, and vice versa. They are very aggressive. They're following up a lot. They are promising you the world, but everybody knows, yeah, it's just 50% of what he says. And normally, if somebody in Germany promises you something as a company, then normally it's more or less what you also will get. And I've spoken with one German with a German company, and I said, you know what, we didn't like this US company. I said, why didn't you like it? Yeah, the sales rep called me every 2 days. And just this other German company, they gave me the offer, and then they said, yeah, whenever you're ready, you come back to us. And after 3 months, I thought that was very nice and very kind. So after 3 months, I went back to them. It's just more the German way of selling. And he said, this other one, he was harassing me. If I saw this US number, I didn't pick up the phone. So that's one. It's about listening and asking questions, extremely important, especially in a B2B context. And the other one is being organized and structured. And that's the other thing is, there's really not so much magic to sales in my point of view, but a lot of hard work, a lot of diligence. And there are a lot of examples where you see that just actually after every conversation, after every meeting, entering the data into your CRM system, it seems easy. It's so freaking difficult. It's incredible. I give you, for example, with i2x, so we are real-time speech analytics companies. We record calls, analyze them. And we had one medium-sized company where we did a trial with, and we analyzed it. And then we couldn't actually, there was like about 20% of the calls where the person said they want to buy a product or they want to have the contract. We couldn't find a follow-up call. So our customer actually complained and said, hey, you're losing 20% of our calls. And we're looking and we thought there was a bug, and it was like I asked the engineers and said, it can't be, where are these calls? They don't magically disappear. But then it turned out that actually 20% of the cases were where the customer told an agent, yes, I want to have a follow-up, or I'm interested, send me the contract. They forgot, or they didn't want to put it into the CRM. So there was no follow-up. Now, if your leads cost 200 euros or 500 euros, was quite an expensive product and expensive leads, then losing 20% of like your potential customers that already agreed to do something is quite extreme. And there's no magic in it. It's just a pure question of process and of structure. And it's then in this case actually quite easy to solve.
Let's move a little bit further ahead. There is a lot of competition out there to hire the best salespeople and people in general. But how can you build your organization in a way that it becomes attractive for a salesperson to join you? Because that's sales from the startup side, right? Like you have to pitch yourself as well. Why should this person join you? So how do you build an organization that is attracting the best sales talent?
It depends on the phase you're in. If you're early, it's really about selling the vision, because there's no product. It's a huge challenge. I mean, salespeople, they want to sell, they want to make some money, they are motivated, hopefully. If you don't have a product at the beginning, you still need somebody to sell. So you need to sell them a vision and hopefully convince them that, and a nice environment. And then once you have a product, hopefully you have a product that's appealing. I mean, it makes, there are different types of salespeople. There are some salespeople who just say, we want to make money, we don't care. So what's my bonus scheme? How much money can I earn? But a lot, if they have similar companies and one, they like the product very much and the other one not so much, then that helps. And also, there's one interesting piece where how to select salespeople, how important it is. Also with the daily deal space. So your customers are a lot of customers are restaurants and hotels. So you'd think that representatives from large beverage companies like Coca-Cola or Pepsi would be really well fitted, because they've known these people for 10, 20, 30 years. So we hired a lot of them, and turns out they were really bad at sales. They couldn't sell this kind of daily deals, Groupon type vouchers to them, and this concept. And at the beginning, we didn't really get it. Why weren't they able to sell? What was the problem? And the problem was that you don't really sell Coke. You distribute it. You have a relationship management, like you're more a relationship manager. You don't need to explain somebody a Coke. You don't need to convince him that, etc. While at the time it was a complicated product that kind of took online traffic and tried to convert it into offline customer, and you had some very complicated deal structuring around it for people that have never done this before. So the kind of beverage salespeople, and didn't matter which, same was true for people who represented beer companies, etc. All of that stuff you don't need to explain and sell. And then we saw, like, who is selling really complicated products that nobody understands but everybody needs? So we said, we're going to hire insurance agents. And you know what? They didn't have a clue about food and beverages. They didn't have a clue about online and about discounts, etc. But you know what? They were amazing at this sales. Because what they've learned is taking really complex problems to everybody, from the professor to the cleaning lady, because everybody needs insurance. So they were accustomed to that, and they were amazing. So we just hired tons of these insurance representatives, and they actually liked it also, my earlier point, because it was just a fun new product.
So what is your experience in setting the right incentive scheme, and just to hear what your best practices are on incentivizing salespeople?
So if you're an early stage company, my recommendation would be, in general, try to keep it as simple as possible. You try to come up with very complicated calculations, and then in the end, it's still different. Definitely for salespeople, there should be a very strong bonus component. I think the more mature and the more experienced the company, the the bigger it is. Sometimes it can go up to 80% or something. But I would always, even at an early stage, make it material, and then maybe even in terms of also what KPIs are you doing from. If you haven't done sales, if you don't know your sales cycles, maybe it's like, okay, amount of customers you have called, or amount of interactions you had, amount of meetings you had, phase, how many companies do you have in which stage of your pipeline, things like that.
Let's think of the team that we have now assembled of these great salespeople. How do you manage them? So what is the way of touching them? Is it are you creating a competitive environment among them, that it's always great to be the one who rings a bell and then basically gets more bookings than the next one? And how do you make sure that there's a healthy level of like a team feeling, but at the same time that everybody's still trying to get better?
What makes people love a company or not? And there are two key things it comes down to. I think it's vision and it's your coworkers. If you have a company with a great vision and with something you truly believe in and amazing people, your colleagues, you will love that place a lot. And everything else actually in a way is secondary. Like if you get free food or stuff, it doesn't matter so much than that. Now with sales, definitely competition works in any instant, and sometimes it's also just that it's in competition. It's an inspiration to see that they can do it, and also a certain transparency. Because oftentimes you, for example, hear people that say it can't be done better. No, this is impossible. But then you just see, hey, look, there is this list of people who do this, and then at a second stage, obviously, you should also help people to achieve that. So to give them the necessary training, to give them the necessary coaching. It's still oftentimes crazy how little training and support salespeople, if they start, get. And that's true for complex sales as well as like telesales or customer service. Sometimes it's just a, hey, here half a day, here's some booklets, and now on the phone and or go to a customer and sell. And they didn't even understand well the product.
Do you have any experience with the downsides of setting very high standards and creating this kind of Chanel handbag and the football ticket kind of environment where people are having this ambition to win, and then at one point you can't keep up actually by giving them these additional little perks?
There's a downside with everything. Obviously, also sometimes these incentive schemes become quite expensive, and especially if you have complex products or something. Also, people try. If you have larger amounts, they obviously try everything to reach them, and they try everything to trick the system. And sometimes you need to be quite careful that you're not actually spending more on bonuses and incentives. They're actually bringing in revenues. Well, I think this is on the lower side. I would argue that a healthy amount of competition is actually good, and it's like if you have a room full of people and if they try to call, and if they go out and sell, and if it's a collegial environment, it's actually pretty fun. There are people who really enjoy this energy, and there is indeed then often a lot of energy, and some just hate it. And some say like, I don't want this, and for them it's just the wrong job.
Let's talk quickly about training. So what are your best practices on that? How do you invest in new people, and what do you generally do in order to help them improve their skill set?
I would say it starts with the recognition that training is really important, and we're far beyond the time where you learn something once, but it's constantly training. It's you should give, for example, or I can say what we do. We have every person that works at i2x has a dedicated, we call it education and training budget. They can spend freely as long as it related somewhat to the company. Obviously not like best Bali locations in Asia. But as long as it's somewhat related, we start with onboarding, where you have an onboarding process, where we try to make sure everybody actually understands what is the product the company is selling and building, what is the vision of the company. One thing, if you have larger customer support centers at these companies, no matter what function, it's really a great exercise for a day or two for every person just to work there and work in the customer support function and listen to these calls and trying to answer calls to understand that. And then It's really about sharing best practices, making sure, and that's where companies should put a lot of thought into it, is there are a lot of people in companies who know what normally works and what is a best practice. The biggest problem they have is, how do I share this? How do I make sure that everybody knows this? What we have found and what our application is, that we say we do in real-time coaching. So one of the issues I had at my last company was just simple things like greeting the customer nicely, then asking them what their problem is, telling them what our company does, what the company does, what's the USP. Just these points were close to impossible. If you have hundreds and thousands of people, it's impossible to make everybody do that. So we created a solution that shows it to them in real time and reminds them and say, like, you should actually say that. And then obviously they can still decide if they want to do this or not. I would say it's hard to define that very in general, what people should do. It's different for every company, but the underlying topic, I would say, is training always pays back big time. You can't train enough.
One more question from my side. What is the one thing that you know about sales today that you didn't know at the beginning of your career?
How important process and structure is.
Michi, we are coming to an end. Thank you so much for your time and for being here with us tonight.